In the long and tumultuous history of the Catholic Church, few stories shock as deeply as that of Pope John XII. The most powerful man in Christendom, the spiritual leader of millions, lying dead in bed. But he wasn't surrounded by priests or holy men. He wasn't in prayer, nor in the quiet company of his faithful. He died with another man's wife. Some historical accounts claim it was a sudden stroke. Others suggest a far more violent end. A cuckolded husband bursting into the room, filled with rage, and beating the Pope to death. Pope John XII's life was a whirlwind of scandal, lust, and corruption. He turned the papal palace into a brothel, seduced widows and pilgrims, and abused the church's wealth for his personal pleasure. By the time he died, the very foundations of Rome had trembled under his excesses. Stay with me until the end of this video, and you will hear not only the full story of John XII's shocking life and death, but also why historians still debate whether he was killed by a stroke or by human vengeance. To understand John XII, we must first understand the chaos of 10th century Rome. This was a time when the papacy was not necessarily a sacred office, but a prize to be seized by those with ambition, wealth, and ruthlessness. After the death of Pope John X, the city fell under the control of Marozia, a woman whose ambition and cunning were unmatched. She effectively ruled Rome and used her influence to place 3 puppet popes on the throne, one of them being her own son, John de Vist. However, Marozia's power did not go unchallenged. Her other son, Alberic II, became fed up with her manipulations. Determined to reclaim the city and restore control to his family, he imprisoned his mother and seized power. Alberic ruled Rome with an iron fist, ensuring that no one, not even the Pope, could challenge his authority. As Alberic's life drew to a close in 954, he faced a critical decision: who would succeed him? He gathered the city's clergy and nobility, convincing them to support his illegitimate son, Octavianus, as the next pope. The boy was young, only 18, but Alberic's political maneuvering ensured that he would inherit the papal throne. In 955, Octavianus became Pope John XII, a youth elevated to the highest office in Christendom. But Rome could never have predicted the chaos that would follow. From the very beginning, John XII shocked the people of Rome. Expectations of a young pope who would grow into wisdom and holiness were dashed almost immediately. Instead, the city witnessed the rise of a pope consumed by his own desires. A man who would exploit his power for pleasure and vice. Accusations soon emerged: incest, murder, and rape. John XII used the papal treasury as though it were his personal bank account, spending lavishly on himself and his many indulgences. The Lateran Palace, the heart of papal authority, became a playground of immorality. Prostitutes were housed in the palace, and the young pope spent countless hours in their company, sometimes in the company of dozens at a time. But John VII's excesses extended far beyond the palace walls. He seduced widows across Rome and even kidnapped female pilgrims traveling to St. Peter's Basilica. Word of his behavior spread across Europe. Pilgrims became wary of visiting Rome, fearing the reach of a pope whose lust knew no bounds. Despite his youth, John XII wielded his authority with a frightening audacity. He ruled Rome through fear, pleasure, and manipulation. Yet his vices were not without consequences. The city began to crumble under his corruption, and the reputation of the papacy suffered in ways that would linger for centuries. But John's scandals would only grow more brazen. What came next would cement his place in history, not as a spiritual leader, but as the most scandalous pope Rome had ever known. John XII's lust and ambition knew no limits. He lavished wealth and power on one of his mistresses, even making her governor of Rome. Imagine a pope handing the city's leadership to a woman who was his lover. No institution of holiness was safe from his whims. He seduced women without regard for morality or family ties, including his father's longtime mistress. She became pregnant by him and tragically bled to death during childbirth, one more casualty in a trail of lust and ruin that followed him wherever he went. The pope squandered church funds recklessly. Gold meant for churches, for the poor, for the sustenance of Rome's spiritual life, was instead spent on banquets, fine wines, and the personal pleasures of a man with insatiable desires. Yet, John XII's indulgences were not merely sexual, they were political. He rewarded his lovers with positions of power, creating a network of influence that combined lust with authority. By bending Rome's institutions to his will, he became both feared and reviled. Even the nobility began to question his leadership, but no one dared openly challenge the young pope. His power was absolute, enforced by cunning, intimidation, and the fear of scandal. But all the gold, power, and lust in the world could not protect John XII from the consequences of his choices. His life would end in one final, explosive scandal, one that would shock Rome and echo through history. After nearly a decade of indulgence, Pope John XII's story culminated in one of the most infamous deaths in papal history. On the night of his demise, he was with his latest mistress, continuing the pattern of lust that had defined his papacy. Official church records state he died of a stroke, but other sources paint a far more violent picture. According to these accounts, the husband of the woman discovered the two together. In a fit of rage, he stormed into the room and beat the Pope to death. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in Christendom, stripped of authority in a single violent act, murdered in the bed of another man's wife. Whether he died naturally or violently, the symbolism was undeniable. His life of excess, corruption, and vice had finally caught up with him. John XII's death serves as both a historical footnote and a cautionary tale. It highlighted the extremes of unchecked power and the dangers of a papacy influenced more by personal indulgence than spiritual guidance. But the story doesn't end with his death. His papacy left a legacy that would shape perceptions of the church for decades and spark debates about morality, power, and justice that continue to this day. Pope John XII remains one of the most infamous figures in the history of the Catholic Church. He was remembered not for acts of piety or theological insight, but for scandal, lust, and corruption. His papacy serves as a vivid reminder that the papal throne, like any position of unchecked power, could be abused in ways that shook the very foundations of Christendom. Some historians see him as the product of a broken system, a young man elevated too early into power, molded by ambition and opportunity. Others argue he was inherently corrupt, a man whose desires overrode any sense of duty or morality. What is undeniable is that his death, whether by natural causes or by human vengeance, was the dramatic conclusion to a life marked by excess. It forced Rome, and the wider church, to confront the dangers of moral decay at the highest levels of power. So, consider this. Was John XII punished by God for his sins? Or was it merely the result of human anger and betrayal? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. A grim reminder that when power is absolute, corruption often follows. If you found this story shocking, and you want to uncover more of the hidden scandals that shaped Catholic history, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. In our next video, we'll explore another dark chapter of church history, where betrayal, lust, and ambition collided with faith in ways that are almost too incredible to believe. Because history isn't just about saints and heroes. It's about the scandals, secrets, and sins that shaped the world we live in today.